A great evil is coming, fast approaching the land. The cries that echoes from the sacred forest. She saw this visions in her dream. And this is how it all began. In a village surrounded by an ancient forest, the trees were sacred. It was said that they could sing, and their melodies carries the whispers of the ancestors guiding the people in times of need. Only a few chosen ones blessed with the rare gift of understanding their music could interpret the messages from the spirits. Bisi, a young girl with striking amber eyes, was one of those chosen. From a young age, she could hear the trees' songs, soft, haunting tunes that warned of danger, brought messages of peace, and shared the wisdom of the past. But Bisi kept her gift a secret, fearing that the villagers would treat her differently or demand more from her than she was ready to give. Her only confidant was Olu, a simple farmer who lived on the edge of the village. He had loved Bisi since they were children, always drawn to her gentle spirit, and the way she seemed to be in tune with the world around her. Though he could not hear the trees as she did, he believed in her gift and supported her in silence. They lived together peacefully, until the day their world was shattered. A greedy king from a neighboring kingdom, driven by rumors of the forest's mystical power, arrived with his army to claim the sacred land. The king believed that controlling the ancient forest would grant him immortality, and he vowed to seize it by force. He began tearing through the village, destroying the delicate balance between the forest and its spirits. But unknown to the villagers, one of their own had already betrayed them. Chief Goro, one of the village's most respected elders, had secretly conspired with the king. Blinded by greed and promises of power, Chief Goro had fed the king critical information about the forest's sacred songs and the village's weaknesses. He believed that once the king controlled the forest, he would be richly rewarded and elevated to a position of power. As the wicked king ransacked the village, the people were powerless to resist. The elders, steeped in tradition and knowledge, knew that the king's greed would destroy the delicate balance between their world and the spirits. So they turned to Bisi, sensing that she held the key to saving their land. Reluctantly, Bisi revealed her gift before the elders. She told the elders how the trees had been singing a warning songs for days, growing louder with each step the king took towards their land. But as she speaks, she sensed something was wrong. She could hear a new melody, tinged with fear, as if the trees themselves were trying to convey a desperate message of pain. But before she could unravel their meaning, the elders tasked her with confronting the king, a dangerous mission that could cost her life. But Bisi knew she could not refuse. She could hear the trees pleading for her to act swiftly, their songs filled with desperation. As she prepared for the confrontation, she remembered the memory of an ancient prophecy passed down through generations, foretelling that one who speaks the language of the trees will bring salvation or destruction to the land. Her grandmother had warned her of this moment before she died. Her heart was gripped with fear. Could she truly be the key to both their salvation and their doom? Before she left, Olu approached her, concern etched on his face. "I will come with you," he said, his voice filled with determination. And though Bisi knew how dangerous it would be, still she couldn't deny the strength his presence gave her. And so together they set off towards the heart of the forest, where the king had begun cutting down the sacred trees. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the forest grew eerily silent. The trees had stopped singing, as if holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. Bisi and Olu arrived at the clearing just as the king and his soldiers began to chop down a massive, ancient tree. A sinister figure watched from behind the soldiers, Chief Goro, the traitorous elder, who had secretly aligned himself with the king in exchange for promises of power. The king laughed when he saw Bisi and Olu. "You think a girl and a farmer can stop me?" he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. His warriors all laughed back, mockingly, But Bisi and Olu looked determined. "Olu," replies the king, "I, Olu, will resist you with the last drop of my blood." He yelled back at the king. As the king's warriors began charging towards them, Olu lunged forward, standing to protect Bisi from the king's warriors, ready to fight dozens of them all alone. But Bisi was not afraid. Instead, she had a different plan. She knelt beside one of the great trees, her hands resting on its back, and began to whistle a sound. The song emerged from deep within her, a melody she had never heard before, but one that felt as old as time. It was the song of the forest itself, a call to arms. As she sang, the ground began to tremble. The trees stirred, their branches swaying, and a low hum filled the air. The forest had awakened. The king and his soldiers, once standing tall and proud, now trembled in fear as the trees began to move, their roots rising from the ground and forming walls of wood and earth that trapped the invaders. Many of the king's warriors were instantly defeated, while some ran away. But the king, desperate to control the forest's magic, consumed a potion made from the sap of the sacred trees, transforming himself into a monstrous, tree-like creature. His body twisted and warped, fueled by dark magic, as he fought Bisi and Olu in the awakened forest. In the chaos, Chief Goro seized the moment, leading a group of soldiers to the sacred heart of the forest, where the most powerful tree spirits resided. His betrayal was a blow to Bisi's heart, but she had no time to dwell on it. Together, Bisi cried to the trees, urging them to join her in battle. The ancient spirits, awakened by her call, surged forward, their roots and branches becoming sentient warriors. But Chief Goro had begun chanting an ancient binding spell, manipulating the trees and trying to enslave them. Bisi, horrified, felt the power of the forest slipping away. "No!" she cried, rushing toward Chief Goro, but he had already unleashed the dark spirit that had been trapped within the forest for centuries. It rose from the ground, a shadowy figure feeding on fear and chaos. Olu, sensing the danger, rushed to Bisi's side. "We must fight together," he urged. Bisi nodded, her heart racing as she realized they were not just battling for their lives, but for the very soul of the forest. In a moment of desperation, Olu took a stand against the king's monstrous form. He leaped forward, using all his strength to distract the beast, allowing Bisi to focus on the dark spirit. Just as the tree-like monster lunged at them, Olu plunged a sacred root into its heart. The tree-like creature writhed and howled in anguish, its power fading. It fell down and slowly turned back to the king's real form. With the monstrous tree-like creature defeated, Bisi gained the upper hand, having enough time to summon every ounce of magic within her. The trees rallied around her, their roots intertwining, trapping the dark spirit summoned by Chief Goro's spell. The trees absorbed the dark power, and the shadowy figure finally disappeared. In the final moments of the battle, the king, in his desperation, swung his spear towards Bisi, in a bid to kill her. But Olu leapt in front of her, taking the blow. He fell to the ground, gravely wounded. Tears filled Bisi's eyes, but in her grief, she found a strength she didn't know she possessed. She sang a song of healing, pouring all her love and magic into the melody. The trees responded, their roots reaching out to Olu, wrapping around him gently. Slowly, his wounds began to close, his breath returning, as the spirit of the forest revived him. The king, seeing the power of their bond and the strength of the forest, realized he could never defeat the spirits. Defeated and broken, he fled like a scared rabbit, never to return. Chief Goro, afraid of getting caught, tried to escape by sneaking out of the forest after the king. However, the trees had other plans for the traitor. The very roots of the sacred trees snaked across the battlefield, trapping his legs. The chief, who had hoped to flee unnoticed, was caught in the forest's grasp. As the trees began to tighten around him, he screamed for mercy, but none came. Now, with the danger past, Bisi and Olu returned to the village as heroes, their bond stronger than ever. After the battle, peace slowly returned to the forest. The forest grew quiet once more, but the trees' song was different now. It was a song of peace, balance restored, and love that had conquered all. The villagers gathered to mourn their losses and assess the damage. It was then that Chief Goro, still bound by the roots of the trees, was dragged before the village elders. His once proud face was now twisted with fear and shame. The village elders listened in silence as Chief Goro confessed to his betrayal, admitting that he had conspired with the king in exchange for promises of wealth and power. Bisi, standing among the elders, said nothing. She already knew the truth, for the trees had told her long before the battle. With grim faces, the elders pronounced Chief Goro's punishment. His treachery had endangered the entire village, and for that, he was to be banished. He would never again set foot in the village or the sacred forest. The spirits of the trees would watch over him, and should he ever return, they would rise up and strike him down. Chief Goro pleaded for mercy, but none came. 2 warriors escorted him out of the village, driving him deep into the wilderness, far from the sacred land he had betrayed. The trees swayed ominously, closing in behind him, ensuring that he would never return. With the Great War finally over and the forest balance restored, Bisi became the village's protector. Her role as the guardian of the forest was cemented, and she no longer felt the weight of the prophecy. Bisi taught the villagers to listen to the whispers of the forest, ensuring they would never forget the lessons of the past. They learned to live in harmony with the sacred trees, respecting their power and cherishing their songs of the ancient spirits of the forest. Olu, forever by Bisi's side, was hailed as a hero, the one who had plunged the sacred rod into the heart of darkness. Together, Bisi and Olu nurtured the land and ensured that the village thrived in harmony with nature. The story of their courage and the defeat of the dark forces became legend, passed down through generations, forever remembered in the song of the sacred trees. Thank you for watching. Follow the Great Oak Tales for more stories like this.